Gianni Infantino, the president of FIFA, was already unpopular with football fans, from fake peace prizes to hydration breaks and sky-high ticket prices to retracted red cards. The cynicism of football's global governing board was a stain on an otherwise entertaining World Cup. And that cynicism has now gone even further into overdrive. On Tuesday, the Times revealed that Gianni Infantino was planning to sell private stakes in the World Cup in a scheme that could personally make him tens of millions of pounds. Now, FIFA is currently a not-for-profit organisation, effectively owned by the 211 national associations that make up its membership. So the FA being a member, and then every other sort of national football association. But Infantino plans to spin out a for-profit company with him at the helm, presumably on a very good salary, and private investors taking a minority stake. And it gets worse, it gets more cynical, because the investor group set to take a lead stake is led by this man. This is Joshua Kushner, a managing partner of the venture capital firm Thrive Capital. And yes, if you recognize that surname, it's because he's the younger brother of Jared Kushner. Now, Jared Kushner is, of course, Donald Trump's son-in-law. The closeness between Trump and Infantino has long been a source of contention. And the Times says that two sources with knowledge of the discussions said that figures close to the Donald Trump administration have been consulted about this latest plan. Now, it's worth noting, none of the national football associations had been consulted about this plan. So this was leaked to the Times. And all the while, Gianni Infantino, if these sources are correct, had been discussing with Donald Trump how to basically privatize FIFA with a big stake going to Donald Trump's son-in-law. Now, the objections to Infantino's plan have come in thick and fast. UEFA, so that's the European Football Federation, said this crosses a line that football's governing institutions should never cross. UEFA takes it extremely seriously. So should every national football association. Every stakeholder, leagues, clubs, players, supporters, governments, and everyone who cares about the future of the game. The soul and governance of football are not assets to trade, especially with zero transparency as to who gains financially. None of us are the owners of football. It is not FIFA's to sell. And the former head of FIFA, who himself was at the center of a fair few corruption scandals, posted this. So this is Sepp Blatter. The close relationship between the FIFA president and the US president has reached a financial dimension that is deeply damaging to football. No one has the right to sell our game. And Andy Burnham also got in on the action.
Let me say this very clearly. Football does not belong to investors. It belongs to the people who fill the stands, who stand on the touchlines week in, week out, rain or shine. The World Cup is not a product. It is the greatest competition in the world, and it was never anyone's to sell. Dress the deal up however you like. Once you have sold a piece of it, you have sold out. It belongs to the supporters. It always has, and it always will.
And that is very much Andy Burnham in his comfort zone. Infantino's plan will require the support of a majority of FIFA's member associations. Now, the big European associations have already expressed their opposition, so they presumably won't vote for this proposal. But Infantino is hoping to win the support of smaller footballing federations, which is the majority of them, who rely on FIFA for funding. So this is from a Times sort of update on this story today. So they report that in a letter to the national associations, Infantino spells out the financial rewards of allowing private investors to buy stakes in the tournament and says the decision must be taken by September the 19th. He says that a funding package totaling $10 billion will become available if associations sign up. But if they reject it, their earnings will be $2.7 billion. Almost 75% less. Sources opposed to the plan have told the Times they believe it is pure bribery. Aaron, this is an interesting situation because it's one of those ones where, you know, on the face of it, it looks very democratic because it's one national association, one vote. You know, you don't get more votes if you're the FA, which is, you know, a very lucrative organization that controls the Premier League. But if you're the Ghanaian Football Association or even Cape Verde's Football Association, you get the same votes as the FA. So very egalitarian. But it also does mean that, I mean, one of the reasons why it's so corrupt is because it's very easy to, I mean, essentially bribe those small associations. Yeah. Not because they're more, you know, corrupt individuals than the British FA, but because they don't have any money. You can't bribe the
English
British
FA, Michael.
You can't bribe
Please.
The English FA because it's got loads of money. Like these figures that we're talking about here don't mean anything to the FA, but they mean a lot to Cape Verde, for example. Curacao.
Yeah, I mean, UEFA is the European Federation. They are the ones that are most opposed to this. It looks as well like the North American Federation, ironically, may be opposed to it as well. But yeah, Infantino basically has most of Asia, Africa, South America, I don't know about Oceania, in his pocket. So he could win. However, a World Cup without the European sides is not a World Cup. 6 of the 8 quarterfinalists in the last tournament were, of course, the European sides. I can't remember of the last 8 winners, 6 were European again, I think. Look, if there is a World Cup without the European sides, the finalists will be Brazil, Argentina pretty much every time. Maybe Morocco might have a chance. So it'd be a very predictable, dull tournament. People love to wax lyrical about the World Cup and the World coming together. I do as well, but we also have to be realistic. Brazil, Argentina, 1 or 2 other teams, plus the Europeans, are effectively the only teams that are highly competitive and able to beat anyone else. And I think that's...
So just to take a step back, because I didn't mention it in my intro, one of the responses being discussed is that the Europeans, instead of just... because they'll vote, but the Europeans could say, if this goes forward, we'll boycott the next World Cup. So it's just to...
Of course, that's easy to say when it's 4 years away, right? The big question would be, for instance, the Women's World Cup is next year. Would you boycott that? That's a FIFA tournament. Would European teams within UEFA boycott the World Club Cup, a FIFA tournament? So, those are separate questions. Would you boycott, the international friendlies with, teams outside your region if the relevant associations were backing this move, for instance? Personally, I think UEFA should walk away if that's what happens. And people might be saying, well, Aaron, that's ridiculous. Look at what we just had. The water breaks, the hydration breaks every 15 minutes. We had a show at halftime with Shakira and, all these Bouncy Bee. Who are we listening to? BTS.
And Burna Boy. I think that's what the amalgam of that you've created into
Katy
Bouncy
Perry.
Bee.
I have no idea.
Katy Perry wasn't there.
Okay.
Who was it? It was Madonna walked out.
Madonna.
Justin Bieber.
I just about know her.
Did an acoustic set.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
And that's before you've got
Shakira was good. The rest was bad.
That's before you've got investment. Chris Martin. That's before you've got investment from the likes of BlackRock and JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs. Okay.
And Donald Trump's.
Yeah, that's before those guys are in town. So, I'm being serious. You would start to see games where, halftime might last an hour, where you'd have 4 breaks each half, where you have 120 teams at the World Cup. But, this is ludicrous. And the reason why the World Cup started as a tournament had nothing to do with this. And Michael, I'll say this, as somebody with literally no English heritage, football was started by working class people in this country, and they took it around the world. It was a game of and for the working classes. Juventus have a white and black strip that is based on the Notts County kit, okay? All kinds of huge football clubs globally were effectively started. AC Milan was started by an Englishman. It was originally a football and cricket club, right? The most successful Italian team in terms of European club football. So this was a game started by and for the working class. These people were emissaries of a game, and it was a cosmopolitan project. They were talking to people. They often couldn't share a language, but they shared a love of the game. And what FIFA is now trying to do with Infantino is completely at odds with the spirit of football and everything I love about football. And I think many people feel the same. So absolutely should be resisted. If that means that UEFA and the FA and the various European associations have nothing to do with FIFA, so be it. There will not be a World Cup that anyone watches. Screw these guys.
I mean, because ultimately, what Infantino would say, obviously, he's a very cynical man, and I think he just wants like a very well-paid job, and he likes sort of gallivanting around with presidents and the like. But if you were to be as sympathetic to him as you possibly could be,
sure.
and the explicit argument he will make is that the reason, I mean, FIFA already makes loads of money, by the way. It doesn't need this private investment to make loads of money. But the reason he's popular with many of the countries is because FIFA has distributed quite a lot of money to small football associations. And obviously, the Europeans don't need that money, but the Europeans the Europeans are loaded. European football clubs are loaded, right? The European national football associations are loaded. So if Infantino's saying, look, this money might not mean much to you, but it means a lot to all of these global South countries. And by the way, that means that they're going to be more competitive at future World Cup. So what you're doing in Europe is actually you're just trying to pull the ladder up and give no one else the opportunity to have a leading, well-funded football culture.
Yeah. I love this idea that the more money you have, the more competitive you are in football. I mean, look at the United States, for goodness sake. They're crap. They're terrible. Look at Brazil.
Definitely helps though, right?
Not really, Michael. If you look at Brazil now, they're not a patch on the side that, say, won the World Cup in 2002. I think Rivaldo, as a child, used to sort of walk 20 kilometers to train. You know, these stories of people historically, Tostao, Jairzinho, Pele, but all the way through to that cohort of players. These people come from very humble, poor backgrounds. Often, one of the reasons why.
But then they get developed by football academies, right? That's what you hear about France, which is that you have poor kids from multicultural backgrounds in the banlieues, sort of like obsessed with football, playing it all the time. But then they get finessed in these well-funded academies.
It really, honestly, Michael, as a sport, it's not a function of investment and money. If that was the case, then England would have 5 World Cups by now, because we put so much into our academies as a result of the Premier League being such a well-funded, outstanding national and international product. So this idea that, well, these smaller associations will have more money, therefore they develop better players, it just doesn't work like that. What you're talking about, what you're describing is patronage networks, right? Infantino is an autocrat. So there will be some, it's like Erdogan in Turkey. Some people love Erdogan because he gives them money, you know? And they're not stupid. It's not false consciousness. But he is also often at odds with quite basic principles of equality under the law and due process and impartiality and democracy.
The clientelist system.
Exactly. And that's what we're seeing with Infantino. And, you know, that is at odds with, I think, the founding principles of FIFA. Go back to a story we talked about last week with these rings. Do you remember that story?
Rings?
The rings. On Tuesday last week, you weren't with me. Since 1930, there have been a few constants at World Cups, right? First World Cup, Uruguay won it in Uruguay, 1930. The Century World Cup, the Centenary World Cup will be in 4 years' time, right? A few constants, one of which is medals. The winner gets a gold medal, the follow-up runner-up gets a silver medal. And in the first World Cup in Uruguay, they sold bronze medals to the public. Now, the winners of this World Cup, Spanish national side, the whole squad of 30 players, there'll be 30 rings made available. It'll be for the manager and the assistant manager and goodness who, but 30 rings will be available. And they're green emeralds and diamonds. They're huge bling bling.
I hadn't seen this.
You haven't seen this?
No.
30 are available to the squad, but then another 1,996 are made available to the public, which brings the number of rings up to 2026, which is the year. And it's crazy.
This is so tacky.
It's tacky, but also the idea that you can just buy a ring, which is a World Cup winner's ring. The point is you get that if you win the World Cup. So on the one hand, there's a critique, which is this is an Americanism. I don't really buy that because America hosts the World Cup. They can do what they like. They can put their stupid American spin on it. That's the point, right? The Brits can do the same when they host it, or the Saudis, or whatever. But this is basically a money-making scheme where FIFA can cream in possibly millions of pounds from basically the global 0.001% buying a piece of jewelry, which fundamentally should only go to people who've actually won a World Cup. So look, they're doing this before they get the private investment. I don't want to even think about what the tournament would be like afterwards. It would be horrific. You know, this is what happens with capitalism, Michael. It eats its own face. So yes, there's loads of money now. What they would create is an unwatchable tournament, which would be shit. The Europeans wouldn't be in it. There'd be infinity ad breaks. And you know what? People would start watching some other, you know, in sub-Saharan Africa, they'd probably say, actually, you know, I like watching the Africa Cup of Nations. It's better. There aren't all these stupid breaks, right? And then that's when American venture capital say, we're going to invest in the Copa America and the African Cup of Nations because actually that gets more eyeballs. No. Andy Burnham's right. And by the way, Michael, people don't need to have bought the Andy Burnham Kool-Aid to agree with this, I hope. Anyway, it's fabulous. We have a prime minister that can talk about something like this in just such a direct, immediate register. Isn't that great?
I mean, it's helpful.
It's helpful.
I mean, people always said about Keir Starmer, that was the one, he did actually like football, but he still couldn't communicate that he liked football, whereas I think Andy Burnham has an Everton season ticket, doesn't he? By the way, if you're ever wondering why I'm sort of in the summer months fidgeting down here, it's because we don't have aircon, but we do have a fan, which means that my papers are constantly trying to fly away. I have to sort of try and keep them down. we got a little bit more of an update on Infantino for you. We'll go through this quite quickly, I have to say. So he's been very active on social media this past week, slamming his haters. So in sort of loads and loads of sort of Instagram reel, he really yapped on. To everyone who missed our beautiful game, the emotions, the celebrations, the laughter, the crying, the deception and the joy. To all of you who missed watching kids, babies, grandparents and parents come together for the beautiful game, I say sorry that the matches are now over, and sorry that you missed all that joy and togetherness. Sorry that you were so consumed by hate and criticism that you missed it all. So he's so much like Donald Trump. To those behind their pens and papers, behind their screens, spreading hate and false rumors, I want to say that while you are sitting behind, we at FIFA are on the front lines, organizing, working hard, and delivering the best show in the world. While you hide, we are exploring the streets of Canada, Mexico, and the United States, talking with fans, engaging with people, and ensuring everyone's safety. While you divide, we unite. People come together as families, as fans, as one. And then he says, we experience no violence, no incidents, 100% safety and security, only joy and happiness. 7 million people from over 200 countries enjoyed the tournament across 16 fantastic cities and stadiums. 0 incidents, 0 hostility, 0 violence, just joy, emotions, happiness, unity, and togetherness. All was safe, secure, and happy. Now, of course, I mean, one, that's ridiculous. He does sound like a kind of angry teenager, exactly like Donald Trump. 2, the Spanish team might not agree there were 0 incidents of violence. So the World Cup final was marred by the Argentinian side pushing and shoving the winning Spanish team after the full-time whistle was blown. That behavior is currently subject to a FIFA investigation. But Infantino appears to be preempting those results, sending a letter to the Argentinian FA congratulating their team for their professionalism, which is not how the rest of the world saw it. That's not the only example of Infantino having a different take on the World Cup to everyone else who witnessed it. Infantino's rambling Instagram post went on to celebrate how Iran entered the United States without any issues, is what he's suggested. Now, that's, of course, the same Iranian team that had their training camp moved from the US to Mexico at the last minute and weren't able to stay after their matches beyond a couple of hours to try and cool down. So that being an example of sort of why we should be so proud of this World Cup does seem a little bit bizarre. Why have FIFA, Aaron, and the United States attracted such a similar personality type to become president? Is there some sort of connection we can draw between these two organizations?
Well, I think sports associations are uniquely disposed to getting these kinds of people, right? We saw it with Sepp Blatter, and those aren't the only two. Big money's involved, lots of status. It's very easy. I think if you're going to be the head of FIFA, you should be a former footballer, personally, or somebody involved in the world of football. This guy was in management, right? And the way he talks, we made this tournament possible. No, you didn't. The footballers make it possible. The fans make it possible. You did nothing. You know, the world was transfixed by the performances of people like Kylian Mbappe and Lionel Messi and Jude Bellingham. He literally thinks, Michael, I sincerely believe this, Gianni Infantino honestly thinks he played as important a role in this World Cup as any of the names I just mentioned. The man is a megalomaniac. I hope the European federations humiliate him. He's truly delulu.